Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tzadik Ches Amud Beis, starting with a new Mishnah on Daf Tzadik Ches Amud Aleph. The Mishnah discusses when a korban Pesach gets mixed together with other korbanos that have different requirements. Says the Mishnah, Ha-Pesach shenis'arei b'zvochim. The korban Pesach that gets mixed together with zvochim, for example, a korban osham and a korban oila. So he designates a lamb for the korban Pesach, but he also designates a lamb for the korban osham and a third lamb for the korban oila. Now the korban Pesach requires one application of blood on the kiyah mizbeach eitzel hayisoid, whereas the application of the oil and the osham are two applications, one on one corner of the mizbeach, one on the opposite corner of the mizbeach. Another difference, for example, is that the korban Pesach is eaten one night, whereas the korban osham is eaten one night and one day, and the korban oil is completely consumed on the mizbeach. So there's different requirements. So what's the protocol since we can't go ahead and offer any of these korbanos up? Says the Mishnah, Kulan yiru ad shistavu v'yamachru. All three of these tloim are let to graze until they get a mum, and then they are sold. Now when each one is sold, the proceeds of the sale then are used to then buy that similar korban. Then used to buy a korban Pesach, and the other was used to buy a korban oila and a korban osham. But the Mishnah adds, "V'yavi d'mei hayafe shebehem mimin zeh, u'b'dmei hayafe shebehem mimin zeh." We take the highest value, that means the most expensive of the three tloim, and that's what we are then going to then buy that value of each of the three tloim. Therefore, since there's an additional cost, the owner will have to then pay out of his pocket for the additional cost that will make up for the higher value of the tle. The Mishnah goes on to say, Nis'are bebecharos, if a korban Pesach gets mixed together with becharos. Now, becharos, a bechar, is when it's the firstborn from a animal that is tahor. It has to be given to the kohen, who offers it as a korban, and he and his family partake in consuming, they're able to eat the korban bechar. Otherwise, it has very similar standards to the korban Pesach. They both don't have smicha, they don't have nisachim, they both do not have tnuufa. So the Mishnah says, Rabbi Shimon Omer, im chaburos kahanim yoichlu. If the chabura that was counted and included in the korban Pesach, then they may partake, they may eat that which was mixed together. Now, there's a difference over here, because even though they're similar in terms of their dinim, but in terms of the achila, there's a difference. The korban Pesach is eaten only with one night, whereas the korban bechar is eaten a night and a day. So therefore, over here, according to Rabbi Shimon, he's enabling the eating of the korban bechar to be eaten with less time, together with the korban Pesach. Sorry, the korban bechar has 2 days and a night. So that's more time than the korban Pesach can be consumed. And still, Rabbi Shimon says that's the eitzah, to allow the kohanim, if that's the chabura, to be able to then consume the korbanos, even though they got mixed together, and even though it will cause the bechar to have less time to be consumed. Says the Gemara Daf Tzadik Ches Amud Beis at the top. V'hakamaisi kachin lebeis hapsul. That's the Gemara. According to this last case that we just discussed, that the korban Pesach gets mixed together with the korban bechar, with the becharos. So Rabbi Shimon says the eitzah is, if it's a chabura of kohanim, they can go ahead and eat that bechar together with the korban Pesach the night of korban Pesach, the night of Tesvav. Ask the Gemara, but you're going to bring kachim the beis hapsul because maybe you'll be then having noisar, you'll have meat that was not consumed the korban bechar. Because since the korban bechar has more time, and now you're limiting its time, that's going to be a problem. They're going to bring up a noisar of the meat of the bechar. Rabbi Shimon answers the Gemara l'taimei. He goes according to his reasoning. The Omar, he says, Mevin kachin the beis hapsul. We do prefer to bring kachin the beis hapsul. If this is a potentiality, we prefer it then to allow the animals to just graze and get a mum. This not, it says in the following Mishnah. Osham shenisare b'shlomim. If you have a korban osham, they got mixed together with shlomim, and they have different requirements. The korban osham, the shlomim. The korban osham is consumed one day and one night. The korban shlomim is consumed with 2 days and a night. Rabbi Shimon Omer yishchetu b'tzofoin v'yachlu kechomer shebehen. Another difference is that the korban osham is much more stringent, that it must be shechted in the northern part of the Azara, whereas the korban shlomim can be shechted anywhere within the walls of Yerushalayim. So it says over here that Rabbi Shimon says you should shecht those two animals, both the osham and the shlomim that were mixed together, and shecht them in the north, the more stringent place of the korban osham, and they shall be eaten also with the stringency of the korban osham, which is only 1 night and 1 day, as opposed to 2 days and a night. Amru loy, the Chacham say back to Rabbi Shimon, ein mevin kachin the beis hapsul. You can't bring kachin the beis hapsul. That means that there's an eventuality that maybe, perhaps, if there's noisar, you'll have to then bring that and burn it, which is something that is not so preferable, says the Chachamim. You can't cause that to happen by then limiting the time of the shlomim. Ask the Gemara, if that's so what does the Chachamim do in our case when the Bechor mixes together with Korban Pesach? Rabban hechi avdinon. Says the Gemara, Amar Ravin namtin loy ad sheyumumu. The Gemara says that the Chachamim said you will wait until they both get a mum, v'yavi behema shmeina, and then take of the two animals, let's say there's a Bechor and a Korban Pesach, you'll take of the fatter, that means that the more expensive one, and v'leiman say kol heicha di isa lepesach tochul aleh dahai. You'll say whichever one there is as a korban pesach, you'll be chal on this one. Ve'ochalu b'taras bechor balmum. In other words, you have a problem according to the chachamim. On the one hand, the korban pesach, you need to be poide it. On the other hand, according to the chor, you can't be poide. You have to wait till it's a balmum. So the korban pesach, you can't have a mum. You have to be poide. According to the korban bechor, you must make it so it's a mum. You can't be poide. What should you do? Says the Gemara, the eitz of the chachamim is that you allow them to both become mum, and then you take the more expensive of the two, and you make a declaration. Where there's a pesach, it'll be chal on this one, and you'll eat them both as taras bechor, as a bal mum. In other words, you're going to say that you're going to be poide the korban pesach. On the other hand, the Bechor was a mum, so either way, you're going to be satisfying the requirements, and that's the eights of the Chachamim. The Gemara now brings the following Mishnah, a lengthy Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Chabura sha'ovad pischa. If you have a Chabura that are all included in one korban Pesach, ve'ovad Pesach, she'ovad pischa, and the Pesach, the korban Pesach gets lost. Ve'omru le'echa, they say, the Bnei Chabura, to one of the members of the Chabura, Tzei ubakesh ushchoit aleinu. They appoint him to be a shaliach, to find the lost korban Pesach, and shecht it on their behalf. Ve'holach v'nimtzo v'shochat. He went and he found the lost korban Pesach, and he shechted it. Ve'heim lochu v'shochtu. But meanwhile, they got nervous. Maybe they're not going to have a korban Pesach, so they went and they shechted a different new korban Pesach. What's the din? Says the Mishnah, Im sheloi nishchat rishoin. If his was shechted first, then he will eat his, and they will eat together with him. In other words, since the one that he shechted was shechted first, and they were also appointing him to be a shaliach on their behalf, so therefore, they were included in this first korban Pesach. Therefore, they eat together with him. However, if their korban Pesach was shechted first, so then that means that since they shechted it first, they now removed themselves, they divested themselves from the original korban Pesach, whereby they're only included in the second korban Pesach that they shechted. They eat their korban Pesach that they shechted, that was shechted first, and he, since he was not included in their Korban Pesach, he then eats his Korban Pesach. If it's not known which of the two was shechted first, or they both shechted at the same time, then what is the din? Says the Mishnah, he eats his own, because he's independent of them. He's counted as his own Korban Pesach, and he was never counted in theirs, whereas they were counted in his, and it's not clear if his was brought first or theirs was shechted first. If his was shechted first, then clearly we saw that they're included in his. However, if theirs is shechted first, then they have divested themselves from his, and they are now included only in their second chabura. Whereby, since we don't know, the din is that they cannot eat their Korban Pesach with him. And what happens to their animal? Their animal goes to the Beis HaSreifa because maybe it didn't have any menuyin, nobody was counted on it, and maybe we don't know which one, if indeed it was shechted second, so therefore it has to go to the Beis HaSreifa. However, they're yoytze yedei chayvason with either one of them, because one of them certainly was a Pesach, only they cannot consume it. So therefore, that's not ma'akev, whereby they are potter from the Korban Pesach Sheni, they were yoytze yedei chayvason with the Pesach Rishon. The Mishnah about brings a second scenario. Omar lahen, he now says to them, when he goes to then seek out the Aveda, the lost Korban Pesach, he says to them, this is now without them making a shliach for them. He, however, says to them, Im echarti tzu'u v'shachtu alai. If I am late, then go ahead and shech the Korban Pesach on my behalf. So that means that they did not make him a shliach. He went on his own volition to seek out the Korban Pesach that was lost. However, he said to them that if he is late, then they should shech the Korban Pesach on his behalf. That means that they are shluchim for him. So what happens? He went and he found the lost Korban Pesach and shechted it. And they then proceeded to then make a Korban Pesach on their own. So what happens? What's the din? If theirs is shechted first, since they divested themselves from the original Korban Pesach, because they didn't make him a shliach, so therefore that's their new Korban Pesach. That's going to be theirs. And since he made them a shaliach, he's now included in that second carbon, whereby hein oichlin mishalahen v'hu oichel imahen. They will consume, they will eat that Korban Pesach, that second Korban Pesach, and he will eat with them. V'im shelo nishchat rishon. However, if his was shechted first, so again he went on his own volition, so that's his own private Korban Pesach, and they were not included in that Korban Pesach. So then he'll have to eat his, and they'll eat theirs. Hu oichel mishalo v'hen oichel mishalahem. Im eina yadua ezemen nishchat rishon oishe shachtu shneim keechad. If it's not known which one was shechted first, or if they were shechted together, the din is hein oichel mishalahen v'hu einoi oichel imahen. They eat their own Korban Pesach, and he eats his own. V'hu eino oichel imahen, and he does not eat with them. And since it could be that he was indeed included in theirs, but it's not known if theirs was first or not, so therefore he does not eat with them, and his has to then go up to the Beis HaSreifa, because it's a suffix. However, in regards to the requirement of Pesach Rishon, he fulfilled, because Mimanav Shach, he was yoytze with one of the karbanos, only he cannot consume it. So therefore, he's yoytze yidei chavasa, and he doesn't have to bring a Pesach Sheni. The Mishnah now brings a third scenario. Omar lehen va'omru loy. He says to them, that means he says to them, be a shaliach on my behalf. If you indeed find the Korban, if you shech the Korban Pesach, then also include me. And they say to him, that means that they also make him a shaliach. Says the Mishnah, oichlin kula mina rishon. Whichever one is first, that's when they all consume. Because if it's theirs that's shechted first, so they were all included in that because he made them a shliach. If his was shechted first, they made him into a shliach, and therefore they're all going to be partaking in that carbon. V'im ein yadua eze mehen nishchat rishoin. If it's not known which of the two was shechted first, then they have to both go to Beis HaSreifa. Shneim yotzin the Beis HaSreifa. Says the Mishnah, a fourth scenario and final scenario. Loy omar lehen v'loy amru loy. He did not make them shalichin, and they did not make him into a shaliach. Each one is independent. Says the Mishnah, ein achroin ze lazeh. Neither one has any requirement towards the other, and each one is an independent carbon. Whenever one shechted it, that's when he shechted his, he will partake in his, and when they shechted theirs, they'll partake in theirs. And those are the four scenarios when a person has a chabura that had a carbon pesach that was lost. Various things that take place if either he then went on his own volition or was made into a shliach, or he made them into shluchim, or they went on their own volition and he did not partake in their carbon pesach whatsoever. We have different scenarios. What is the din in these four different cases?